Hi everyone, Josh Knight the First here with another episode of Exade Replay, coming to you with episode 14 of the series. Let's get right into it. So here we are with another episode of the series, which is arguably the most medically in-depth episode that we've gotten so far. There's a lot to cover as far as the medicinal parts of things, specifically the operation the hero performs later on in the episode, but before we get to that, let's just talk about the episode as a whole. So to start with, at the beginning of the episode, we see that there's no more previews for the Heisei Generations movie. They figure by this point people have already gone to see it, that's already done with. But the other notable thing, there's no more laser in the opening. You see him there in his level 1 form for a second, but no sign of Kiryu Kujo anymore. That hurts, man. I get it, but it hurts. So we find out at the beginning of this episode that as of last episode, nobody knows what's going on with Emu. As we know, he just used that Gashot that he received from Palad to achieve this Mighty Brothers Double X form. Now, the thing about it is, he can't seem to distinguish who's really in charge, him or the other him, you know, the orange or blue versions. And they came back together and he passed out due to some sort of a mental strain or headache that he got as a result of using it. Thing is, nobody in the CR seems to know why that is. Why did he split into two forms and then come back together? That seems to be the function of the Gashot, but aside from that, they have no clue what to expect from Emu now that he's got this new power. As far as Genmu and Palad are concerned, they're taking this a bit differently. Specifically, Kuroto-dan is very upset with this new development. He figures he is the game master here in the show. If anybody's gonna make a game, it's gonna be him. If Emu made a game, it needs to be destroyed. Now, I mean, I get it. You were the head of a major game corporation up till this point, but I mean, there's always room for indie developers, so I don't think that's a big problem for you. Now, as far as Palad is concerned, he's taking that a bit differently as well. He wants credit for himself that he gave the Gashot to Emu to begin with, but at the same time he's happy that he'll be using this information, or rather Kuroto-dan will be using this information to create his writer form, which we'll see next episode. And as for dealing with the patient for this episode, Mr. Shirakawa, who, as we know now, has Bugster virus on top of already having pancreatic cancer, we're going to see how this is going to play out here, and it's very interesting, as I said at the top of the show, that this was so medically involved. Now, to begin with, Emu is still holding on to this idea that we can cure you, not just the Bugster virus, but we might be able to do something about that pancreatic cancer. He specifically cites that he wants to do something to bring back Mr. Shirakawa's smile. Now, that's a very Kuga thing of him. By which I mean back in the year 2000 when Kamen Rider Kuga restarted the franchise, Kuga, or rather Godai Yusuke, his idea was he wanted to protect people's smiles. That was the thing that kept him going. That's why he fought on as a Kamen Rider. So it's nice to see that that's related back to again. And yes, that is another Kuga throwback. I watched that and I saw it Toei. It became very apparent that this Bugster was targeting Hiro specifically. Now mind you, this Bugster had targeted Hiro before and is back now to bug him again. Ha, Bugster pun. Let's get that out of the way. Point being, the reason for this is that Mr. Shirakawa realizes that Hiro is also a genius surgeon, much like him. Hiro represents hope. The hope that there is a possibility that his cancer can be treated on top of the Bugster virus. Now, it's interesting to see how Emu decided to play to Hiro's ego in order to get this facilitated. So the plan of attack here is twofold. Emu's going to do his job and defeat the Bugster, while Hiro does his job as a surgeon and operates on Mr. Shirakawa's pancreatic cancer. So this was a very important part of the episode here, because now we're actually going to see how the series handles the actual hospital goings-on by specifically going into an operation. Now, like most of you out there, I'm not a doctor, despite what the lab coat says. I don't know very much about how cancer actually works, or the actual operations that need to be done in order to excise it. So I decided to go ahead and look that up for you guys, because I imagine you were about as clueless as I was in the initial watching of this episode. Now, you'll have to bear with me. I did have to take quite a bit of notes on this section because I'm not familiar with the procedure that Hiro decided to do, but we'll go ahead and go over that right now. So, what Hiro decided to go ahead and do as the appropriate course of action in treating Mr. Shirakawa's pancreatic cancer was known as a pylorus-preserving Whipple and portal vein bypass excision. Now, basically what that means is that we find out through context that the top half of his pancreas is where his cancer is housed. This particular procedure is designed for speed and for negation of blood loss. They can do it very quickly. The procedure takes a little over an hour if done correctly, so that actually speaks to Hiro's speed as a surgeon. So by making a very specific incision, Hiro enters into the upper abdominal cavity where he'll check to see if there's any other portions of that area that seem to have been infected by the cancerous cells. From there, Hiro and his team will check the area and prepare the tissues for division for the removal of the cancerous lump. from there, they'll remove several different pieces, including the distal half of the stomach, gallbladder, the head of the pancreas, duodenum, which they mentioned there in the episode, the lymph nodes, and the small intestine. Basically, a large chunk of the stomach. From there, they'll have to reconnect all the intestinal tissues to make sure that Mr. Shirakawa will be able to eat and digest food properly, and from there, that should be fine, and that will have removed the cancerous portion of the pancreas. Now, I'm happy to report that from an extensive amount of research on my end, it does seem to be that the episode was fairly medically accurate when it came to this procedure. After watching several different types of medical shows like Scrubs, ER, House, you can see after a while that the actors have taught themselves how to handle the equipment that they're working with. Here in Exate, that doesn't seem to be the case. I trust Hiro as a lead actor on a children's television show, but as a doctor, I'm still not buying it. But now that we've gotten past the medical portion of the episode, let's actually get back to the tokusatsu portion of the episode, which would be Exate's fight against the Bugster and then eventually Genmu. So for the most part, as per usual, Exate's holding his own well against the Bugster. He did well to stay out of the AoE of the Bugster since he seems to be a mage-type character and has these kind of magic spells that he's throwing at him. But the interesting part of the episode are the references back to Kiria. Deciding to use his friend's loss as a source of strength, Emu decides to use the Boxo Bike Gashot to call forth the bike that was previously the level 2 form for Laser. Now admittedly, there's the noticeable change of there are no eyes on the bike, and that's just another bit of sadness, but that's not sad for Emu. He's using that as strength to go ahead and push the fight along, to actually push the Bugster physically on the front of the bike, which again is another Kuga throwback, I think, to take him to the next portion of the fight over in the Bay Area. But to juxtapose that, when Genmu gets in on the fight, he pulls out the Gashakon Sparrow, noting, "Oh, that's a nice memento of Kiria. I'm going to use this memento to herd to you." That's a very, very villain thing to do, and I very much like that characterization coming out of Kuroto Dan. And of course now we get to the major selling point of this episode, the debut fight of the Mighty Brothers Double X form. Now despite what we saw at the end of last episode and the beginning of this episode, now we actually see them in action, and I love it. I'm actually really impressed with how they shot this thing, how it works. It's very impressive. It's worth noting that the choreography and the cinematography blend beautifully here. Now the easiest way to tell the two parts aside would be through the color schemes. The left side is the orange side, that's the gamer portion, that's M, and the blue side, the right side, that's Emu, the doctor cool-headed side. Between the two of them, they easily take care of both the Bugster and Genmu, done with very good choreography, very good cinematography. That handoff with the Gashakon Key Slasher, I loved it. And then that critical strike, it's very much both parts Double Dragon and Mario. I loved it. And of course, while this whole thing is going on, we have Taiga over on the side with Saiba Nico watching this fight. Now earlier in this episode, Saiba Nico still seems to be taunting Taiga with this information about Emu, but I'm starting to think she doesn't actually know anything about him, or if she does, it's very irrelevant to what's going on now. Now, as I was saying last episode, we don't know very much about her, so now I'm going to go ahead and ask this question: who is she? Or rather, what is she? Which is basically me asking, is she a Bugster or is she a human? Now, if she's a Bugster, that would make a little bit of sense because a new character coming in just after we lost a villain would indicate there's a high likelihood she's a villain. But I'm starting to think she's just a human. If she's anybody, she's somebody who was in a tournament with Emu at some point in the past and must have a grudge against him, because otherwise, why would she be pushing Taiga along so hard to beat him? That just seems to make the most sense to me. So after the fight, Taiga very wisely decides to go ahead and take a sample of Emu's blood and analyze it to see why it is that Exate is so different from everyone else. His findings show that he has the Bugster virus, he has game sickness. So what exactly does this mean? For me, it means two things. For one thing, it most likely means that the M portion of his personality is the Bugster. We never saw that earlier on with him as a child, and it just seems to have developed more recently since he's become a common rider. So that might be what that is. That might be what the separation is. Emu, the blue portion, is just him as a human, and the Bugster portion has manifested itself into the gamer part of his personality. Now beyond that, the more interesting thing to look at goes back to the last episode. As we've seen, the CR has gone public with the Bugster virus information and who's out there curing it, namely the common riders. If the public finds out that one of the people that is supposed to be working on curing them has the very disease that they're trying to fight against, that could create an incredible uproar. So I do think they're going to hit that plot point at some point. Point, yes, that makes sense. But that plot point will probably have to wait until after next week's episode, when we'll see the debut of the newest writer, Kamen Rider Paradox, and see how that's going to change up the game thus far. But you guys tell me what you thought of this episode in the comments below. Did you guys like that finisher from Mighty Brothers XX like I did? Because that was a sweet rider kick. Do you think Hiro's dad should have been in this episode? Because he was there last week, where was he this week? And what do you think of Pulpy People Papo just sitting there off in the corner? Because I'm actually very okay with that. And of course, you can always talk to me on social media during the week. Over on Twitter, I'm at JoshKnight1st. This has been episode 14 of Ex-Aid Replay for episode 14 of the series, We're Common Writers. I'm Josh Knight the First. I'll see you guys again next week.